Welcome to the Green Living Now podcast. I'm your host, Amy Tedisco Hartshorn, and I am so excited that you're here. This is going to be a great conversation. In today's episode, I am talking to my husband, organic farmer Dave Hartshorn. He has such an inspiring story, going from his dad's conventional dairy farm to having a chance encounter with some pumpkin seeds in what I call his Jack and the Beanstalk moment, and how that inspired him to create a roadside farm stand growing organic fruits and vegetables and flowers that has become so popular, and especially in the touristy community that we live in. He talks about his challenges, his triumphs, the lessons that he's learned, some really powerful information, especially if you're interested in organic gardening yourself, even tips on how to start your own garden. Just a wealth of information. I am really excited for you to join me. So, this is an exciting show to welcome my husband, organic farmer Dave Hartshorn. Hello, husband. Let's talk about how did you even start doing vegetable farming? Because that's kind of a cool story.
My life didn't start out as an organic farmer. My father was a dairy farmer, and I was born into that. And I grew up with lots of cows and some pigs and some chickens. But we made milk. We made milk the conventional way. And my father grew up with pesticides and herbicides to grow corn. That was all part of it back then, and we didn't really question it. So there's the generational passage. My father wanted to get out of dairy and concentrate on logging and sawmilling. I made a decision for myself and family and future not to pursue dairy. We had a maple business that was shared by myself and my dad, but I needed to pursue something else. I went into marketing on weekends and nights to pick up a marketing degree, and that ironically got me into the fruit and vegetable market that I have now.
So, make that connection for us. How did that work?
I needed funds for college. And so that leads down to another story. When I was with the dairy cattle, somebody gave me some pumpkin seeds, and I really didn't want to bother with, so I threw the packet over the bank into a manure pile and forgot about it. And the fall came along, and we had a frost, and the leaves went down, and here were these giant pumpkins sitting all over the place. So I loaded them up in a wheelbarrow and hauled them around to the house. The farmhouse sat next to Route 100, which is a really busy corridor, traffic corridor, tourist. I put them on the porch because I wanted people to see them. And they did. They started pulling in and taking pictures of them. And then one day, boom, somebody bought one. They weren't even for sale.
Right.
And somebody wanted to buy one or two of them to put in front of their shop, their business, as an attractor factor. And boy, the light bulb started spinning in my head. Wow, that would be really cool. So the next season, I plowed up the back lawn and I planted a bunch of pumpkins, and I put them on a wagon, hauled them out next to the road, and put a honor box there with a bathroom scale. And I sold a bunch of them, and I started making money on them. So the next season rolls around and I plow up a whole field. I plant them all, and then the fall comes around and people start pulling in. They want to go out and cut their pumpkins. And they came by the droves.
Wow. And this
And
was with no advertising, right? They just
no
saw pumpkin.
advertising. The pumpkins themselves, a field of them beside the road, is really attractive. And
Wow.
at that time, there were not very many pumpkin growers.
Right.
And so I did the same thing. I put the wagon down next to the road and I loaded it up with pumpkins. And they had a choice: they could get them off the pumpkin or they could go pick them. And
Oh,
the money box started filling up. And of course, I was nowhere around because I was going back to school,
right.
but the money box kept filling up. So I was able to put some money away towards college, to the point where I got phone calls that, hey, we noticed there were some big bills in that box. We took the money home for safekeeping so somebody wouldn't be tempted, and we'll bring it to you tomorrow.
Isn't that awesome? The honesty of Vermonters. I love that.
I thought, wow, I'm doing all right with these pumpkins. And I always had this idea in the back of my mind somehow that it'd be pretty cool to have a roadside stand selling my wares.
Wow.
And lo and behold, one of the owners of the shopping center in town came to me and said, we've got this great green in the shopping center. I think it would be really cool if we had a farmer's market.
This is 30 some odd years ago in Vermont,
Yeah,
right?
35 probably. When we established that market, people came from all the areas that have farmers markets today. So we were taking a huge part of the state.
Wow.
We pulled a lot of people from everywhere. We grew really fast, and I grew from my first farmers market. I unscrewed the closet doors in the house and put them on two sawhorses. That was my table. I threw a tablecloth over it and bought a little pop-up tent. And that was my first farmer's market. I sold some maple syrup and in the fall, of course, pumpkins and squash. And I grew just as everybody else who was there
Right.
did. It got to the point where I needed something more than some sawhorses in the closet door. So I built a replica of a mini sugar house on wheels,
You built that yourself.
built that myself.
Wow.
But it had a big flip up canopy, and I quickly became the biggest vendor there. I started raising strawberries and blueberries and increasing the offerings, and it got to the point where uh, I actually a roadside uh, started as sugar house with vegetables,
Hmm.
and soon that became a little too small, and I put up a big post and beam open air pavilion type farm stand. I was doing both the farmers market and that, but running the farm stand on honor system while
Mm.
I was at the market, it became kind of a problem because I was always kind of stealing from the farm stand to go to the market because you want a big show at the market.
Right. And so it was really decreasing your ability to sell at the farm stand because you had to do so much more at the farmer's market. And then, of course, getting up at 2 in the morning to set
Well,
up and
the thing that
sell.
always stuck with me is the motto pile high, sell high,
Right.
which is simply saying that the bigger your show, the more people
Yeah.
are attracted to it,
Yeah.
and the more people respect you as a legitimate grower.
Right.
And I would spend hours in the middle of the night to create these
Yeah.
elaborate stacks of corn that looked like pineapples, and had these tables with pints of berries and tomatoes and you name it in a tapestry patchwork.
My observation of you, knowing you now for 15 years, is that you are a lot artist as well as the technician of being able to grow this food so well. The art part is very important to you. And I remember you said something about when you look at the soil in the spring, how do you see that soil?
I don't look at the soil per se. I look at the appearance of the farm stand, the land, the leftover decay of the previous crops, the blankness of it all. It's
Okay.
an empty canvas that needs to be filled. It's a void. And to me, it's just embarrassing. So,
Even though it's the natural order of things for things to decay and yeah.
so to be able to paint that tapestry with living art is the
Yeah.
validation
Yeah.
that most of us have to continue along because it's appreciated by your customers, by the people that drive by, and nothing compares to the tourism scene.
Mm.
We pull a lot of tourists in largely because of the attractiveness and the appeal. Some of
Yes.
it's word of mouth and quality of goods and things like that. But to have this breathtaking picture of something that wasn't,
Right. And I
and
know I've heard you call it vegetative art.
something that's appeared on a canvas that everybody's snapping pictures of.
Right.
So this art per se is on walls and in albums
Right.
and phones and
Yeah.
all over the world, in every continent, in every country. This place has been memorialized
Yes. And
forever.
especially the farm stand with the beautiful mural that we had done by Lisa Colby. Yeah,
Right.
that's been
All these things
stunning.
add up to the appeal, and to be able to say, well, there are artists and their art goes everywhere, but
Right.
to be able to say, I have said to you earlier that this is what validates me or most farmers to continue is somebody has in their mind that this is something exceptional and
Yeah.
awesome, and that you have the ability to change their life in a
Right.
certain way for the best.
So being appreciated for all that is a good thing.
Yeah, because if you weren't,
Yeah,
if
then
you
what would be
weren't,
the point of all that hard
if you
work?
weren't, it would just be a dollars and cents thing.
Yeah,
It's
transactional.
not that it doesn't transfer into dollars and cents, but if all you're working for is dollars and cents,
You're in
no
the wrong
problem.
industry.
When you're down, you're not going to have the ability to get up again unless you have that passionate feeling in your heart.
Let me ask you, so you grew up with a dad who was very conventional as far as using pesticides and everything. How did you come upon organic and how did you even know what to do?
At that particular time, there was across the country the startup of organic, and I had touched upon it here and there, and people were starting to suggest to me, why don't you become an organic farmer?
Oh, so people had actually mentioned it to you.
Yeah, people had
Oh,
mentioned
okay.
it to me, and I had been watching it for some time, and I just couldn't picture myself out there in that big white suit with a spray apparatus and a
Yeah,
mask on and all that. It just
right.
smells of, boy, I wouldn't want to eat that. The thing is, with organic farming, we do actually spray some things on the plant.
Right. So let's get into that. What's the difference between certified organic versus conventional?
Conventional agriculture uses some really potent compounds that can hurt bees, hurt the human body, that can really do some unhealthy
Poison.
things to environment and plants and people. So
Yeah.
it didn't really resonate with me too well. I looked into how difficult is this going to be for me to transition, and it turns out it wasn't hard for me at all because I hadn't been doing it.
So there was nothing on the land that you were going to use for the
Well,
organic farm,
there had been historically.
but not in at least 3 years or more.
It was really easy for me to make that transition because it was
Right.
kind of almost what I was doing anyway.
Right. And just thinking about how did you grow the pumpkins? Did you do research to figure anything out, or you just kind of winged it, or?
Oh man, I didn't know anything. I remember getting hammered, knocked down, punched around by things that I didn't know. For instance, like planting the wrong things and wasting things that didn't sell,
Oh,
right? Like
what
the
were some
first
of
thing,
those?
oh, turnips. That particular time, nobody was buying turnips. And
Yeah.
so I wasted all that time and effort on this is just one little item, a whole row of turnips.
Did you ask people what they wanted? Like when you were at the farmer's market, did you get any customer feedback, like what kind of vegetables or fruits you'd want, or not necessarily?
Not not necessarily. I was the adventurous type. I swallowed up everything I could find and all the journals.
Right. So you did a ton of research,
I
knowing
would go
you.
I would go to the farmers meetings. I would learn from other farmers. But the biggest thing for me was the mistakes. Sometimes things get by you because man, you're finished one thing, you're on to the next. And then I was, oh shoot, I didn't plant this particular tomato and it really
Oops.
sells. Or, oh man, I should have trusted myself last night, the frost, and I just chanced it. And man, I lost 50% of my flowers on the strawberries because I didn't take the two
Oh,
hours
to
to
cover
go
them.
down there and cover things up.
Yeah.
Would have saved me 50% of a crop. You know, sometimes trust your instinct, and a lot of time it's wasted. You'll go down and you'll do it for
Right.
no
But better safe than sorry, I guess, has been
Better
the
safe than
message, right?
sorry, because a
Yeah.
few hours of your time is worth
Yeah.
a whole lot more than, and there's countless
Yeah.
examples of that. Oh, here's a big one. Most of my land is all floodable. The Mad River brings fertility, but it also brings chaos in the form of floods. So it's August, and the first hurricanes are starting to swirl around in the Gulf, and there was a big one down there swirling around, and they were talking about which way it's going to go. Vermont is not a hurricane state, but I'll tell you what,
Typically.
we are a mountain state, and if we get any remnants of a hurricane, all that water comes splashing down into our rivers, and then it just wreaks havoc. So we're a couple days out, and I said, you know what? And I don't feel good about this. I'm going to go harvest all the pumpkins and squash that are down on the river bottom fields. And everybody thought, well, you're kind of crazy doing that.
Is
But
this Irene that we're talking about?
it was Irene.
Tropical storm Irene.
I worked around the clock picking and hauling them up there alone. And I got them all home. And I'll be darned if it didn't flood incredibly
Yeah, that was
during
a
our
bad one.
rain. That field where all those pumpkins were, there were 6, 7 feet of water there. And there were some pumpkins that I didn't get, some
Yeah.
watermelons, and they were up in the trees all the way down the river.
Wow.
But I got the majority of those things out of there. Now, the water continued to rise, and it came across the high part of Route 100 and started to get
Flood our
higher and higher
driveway in
where all
front
the
of the
pumpkins were
farm stand.
stacked up near the farm stand. And people could see, so they started helping me move pumpkins,
Right, because they were all floating away in
starting to
the
float
display
back into
area.
the river again. And so we moved them all up to high ground. So that was a smart move. I could have very easily said, oh man, that's going to be just too much work. But hey, it was worth it. And so this shirt here was a shirt that came out of one of Gracie Potter concerts for flood relief. It says, hug your farmer.
It's beautiful.
And so there are people out there that are always so necessary for the farming community. And after that flood, there were people that came out of everywhere to help out because they actually value their local farmer and what they do for the land and the aesthetics and for them.
Yeah, I remember that was a turning point because I don't think you knew how much people appreciated what you did until you saw the outpouring of financial help where people would buy a pound of tomatoes instead of spending $4, they'd give you 12, or donate money or donate time to put things back where they were or clean up the mess in the different fields. I mean, I know that that was just a really remarkable outpouring of love and support. I want to go back to what's the difference between certified organic and conventional, because I don't think we ever really finished that. So, how do you describe that?
Well, there's a whole book of standards, and this goes towards the health of the farm in general, its water, its ecosystems, its surrounding wildlife, its
Mm,
bees, its ability to protect itself from erosion, from ruining the soil, keep that soil vibrant and strong and healthy, to keep the food safe.
right.
The most basic of the standards is to keep the food sustainable, keep the farm sustainable, keep it safe, keep it healthy, and keep it going on for future generations. And
Right.
to give the customer, which all comes down to the customer, this sense that what they're getting is the healthiest experience on the planet. A
And
farmer
delicious too.
eating the food.
When I describe it to people that come for tours, I always say that on an organic farm, the soil is alive, whereas on a conventional farm, it's really more like dirt that's holding the plant in place, which they then douse with synthetic fertilizers, usually made from petroleum, and the pesticides are made from petroleum products and are very toxic to not just the weeds, but all living things, us included. But then there's certain techniques that you do that make it more sustainable. Do you want to talk a little bit about what those techniques are?
Well, you got to put more back into the soil than you take out of it. That's
Right.
the way it should be because that's how you grow soil.
Yep.
If you don't do that, you're taking away from soil, and it takes what, 1,000 years to grow an inch of topsoil. So we do a lot of things. There's a lot of things that mainstream farming is doing too. They've realized
Oh,
that they have to start taking better care of their soil too. So they're rotating crops or cover cropping or adding things back. But the difference is not a lot of them able to give up some of these things like Roundup products like glyphosate, because the pesticide and herbicide companies are so powerful, they can manipulate farm policy and work their way into the farm bill.
yep.
Or
Well, and they're quick and easy versus when you have to hire people or do it yourself to weed by hand or with a hoe, or sometimes you can use a tractor when the plants are little. It's so much easier just to spray that glyphosate on the weeds alongside the corn or whatever they're growing, right? And then poof, those weeds are done. Whereas you're having to do multiple weedings over and over again.
well, for instance, let's take a one plot of corn. I have conventional growers near me. They put in their sweet corn and
Oh,
spray it. While they're done for the season weeding and all they have to do is harvest it later, we're on our hands and knees. I don't have fungicide on the seed.
right.
Fungicide is pretty potent carcinogen, and I don't use it. It's part of the organic standards. You will not use those types of things, but conventional growers will do it so they don't have any misses in their field. Because if that soil temperature is not up there above 60 degrees, you're going to lose 50% of whatever you plant right off the bat, because that fungicide that's on the conventional seed, none of the funguses can attack it. So they get perfect germination, and I wouldn't.
Organic seeds rot more easily, but also you have birds when you put your corn seed in the soil, don't you have birds trying to grab them?
So that's another thing. So what I did for years was I would plant it and put a row cover over it. The seedlings, when they came up from getting pulled up by the birds, and a corn seed is one of the sweetest things you'll ever put in the soil. And
Oh,
so everything's attracted to it. The
right.
worms are attracted to it, the maggots are attracted to it,
Oof.
the birds, everything gets into it. So I would put these row covers on to protect for the frost, to warm up the soil a little bit. They became microclimates for weeds, because the weeds came
Oh,
up in the first few days where the corn seed took a couple weeks. So when I would pull that tarp off, the weeds were 6 inches high and the corn was only 2 inches high. Weeding this became hours and hours, day after day. And it wasn't just once. Every time you pull a weed, you activate more seeds in the weed zone, pull them up or put them down, and then more come back. So you're going through um, 3 or 4 times in the same area on your hands and knees.
right.
I've gone away from that. I transplant now. If you transplant a plant that's 6 inches high into has no weeds, it gets high enough to the point where you can cultivate with a tractor and throw dirt over it and stay
Right.
ahead of it.
Let's talk about the role of pollinators.
Some things will pollinate themselves. For instance, there are some forms of cucumbers that'll pollinate themselves, or peas and beans. The wind pollinates them to a certain degree, but the more pollen you spread, the better. It's helpful to have a little extra pollination there, and that comes in the form of shaking
Yeah,
uh,
so talk about the
insect.
the tomatoes that you plant early in the one heated greenhouse. You have to pollinate yourself because obviously there's no insects at that
Well,
time.
most big growers do not do that. They'll buy bumble. I'll do it by hand. And I'll take the time and I'll go around the greenhouse every day. I'll put my finger right in the stamens of the flower. A lot of folks will vibrate,
So
have
you're
to
kind of
vibrate
tickling the pollen out so that it falls into the
actually
other.
physically moving pollen around with my finger. A lot of people will just shake the living daylights out of the stalk. There are special vibrators that you can use to put on the stem that shake it. But the more times you do it, the bigger the fruit. For instance, you take a watermelon or cantaloupe, a bumblebee visits it, just once. It takes 10 honeybees to visit that same flower to do the same amount of pollination.
Wow. That's incredible.
In recent years, strawberries have started to flower earlier.
Right.
And that's kind of a result of I started using row covers instead. And what that does is in the spring, it kind of promotes them to come along quicker than they should.
Especially if it's warmer temperatures
Right.
outside. Yeah.
And so you have to pull those covers off when they start to flower because
Right.
if those covers are on, obviously there's no pollination. But the trouble is there's no pollinators around sometimes that early because what we've kind of done is manipulated the ecosystem ahead of the bees.
Yeah, so talk about what you innovated when you had to pollinate all these strawberry fields because you had the blossoms already out needing pollinators, but it was too early for pollinators. So what did you come up with?
Day after day, I'm out there on my hands and knees, like a stalker looking for anything that was pollinating the blossoms. I'd sit there for 10 minutes and
Oh,
see absolutely nothing. And I thought, wow, I'm not going to get anything out of this.
right.
I got to have pollination. So I went up to the local hardware store and bought some
Feather dusters.
feather dusters. And I got some folks to help. And we went out there and literally put them down into the foliage and blooms and twirled them around and shook them around
And you went up and down the rows every day, right? It wasn't like a
every,
one and done.
every single day because remember, not all of your fruit pollinates at the same time.
Different blossoms come out at different times.
Yeah, the more you pollinate them, the more fruit set you get and bigger size. And what a job!
But but the payoff was remarkable. After that first time you did that, those were the biggest, best strawberries I think you've ever had.
You
It was
know,
amazing.
but again, that's a lot of work.
Right. I think that's the biggest takeaway. I was organic gardening on a small scale before I met you, but to see what you do, and it's not even that big of a farm, as you've pointed out, but the amount of work that is required to grow this incredible food is mind-boggling. When people come for tours, they cannot believe how much goes into raising food. And that takes a huge toll on your body and your mind, right? Because it's not just the physical output that you're dealing with, but you're trying to anticipate, okay, weather is changing, or now there's bears trying to get the corn. So that requires not only netting corn, but then putting up electric fence around it to keep them out. I mean, there's so many different things that change from year to year, even.
Thinks that the gardening season starts in June or
Right.
late May, right? So my season starts the first week of February.
Yeah, talk about what you're doing.
So I start boring the first holes into the maple trees in February. That's my cue to start dropping the first tomato seeds in the flats, the little cells with the potting soil in the house, the seed mat, because that's the only way you're going to get a tomato.
What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions about organic farming that people might have?
Well, I actually have heard that, oh, it's more dangerous because they're using cow manure. This is the kind of narrow-minded thinking that people get in their head, and it's hard to shake it sometimes.
Right.
But no, part of the standards of organic agriculture is you're not putting any raw manure anywhere near a fruit that's going to be susceptible. Now, manure is a big component of growing things. Manure is a natural component of the environment. We do it, animals do it. It was created for a reason. It renourishes the soil. So organic agriculture allows for the use of manure, but
Yep.
not used where it can be dangerous, not anywhere near a fruiting body or a rooting,
Right.
like beets or carrots or lettuce.
Right.
You can use uh, raw manure way ahead of crops.
Oh, before any crop is in the ground.
So the raw manure gets incorporated and the biodynamic activity of the organisms inside the soil purify it.
Right. And so those microorganisms are very important in a healthy living soil. Do you want to talk about what the role they play?
So they they're the ones that put all of these elements returning to the soil into a usable form for the plant to uptake again, the cycle.
Right. So they're breaking down all that organic matter in order to create the nutrients to feed the plants that you're putting in the soil.
They're doing that. They're creating protective bodies in the soil. They're reorganizing that material coming in for use later date, for use immediately. Some of these organisms are symbiotic. They grow on the plant themselves.
Mm,
All plants, 99.9% plants need nitrogen
right. To
for
grow.
its biological activities and growth. Nitrogen is produced by only a few different means for availability to the plant. One of them is electrolysis. So when it's lightning,
Yeah.
that is creating water and oxygen and releasing nitrogen from its electrolysis.
So it's actually
That's why
beneficial for
sometimes
farming.
beneficial for farming in that you're getting fertility in your rainwater.
Yeah.
If you've ever really noticed after a big electrical storm, the next day when the sun comes out, everything looks greener.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's some nitrogen. That's nitrogen being absorbed right directly into the leaf structures. That's one way to get nitrogen. The other was a symbiotic relationship where legumes, they have a certain bacteria that grows on their roots.
And that's
Even
naturally occurring.
it's naturally occurring. They're legumes, like beans, peas, alfalfa, things like that. But the plant has to die. Okay, but on now these root nodules are full of nitrogen that has been converted from the air in the soil and atmosphere by these small biological bodies. They have done the converting. They have
So
now made
when,
nitrogen available to other plants.
okay, so you're saying, so when you grow a crop of peas or beans, after that crop has been harvested and has gone back into the soil, it's actually generated extra nitrogen. Is that
Yes,
what you're
it does.
saying?
It's
Cool.
created a fertilizer. If you want to be an organic gardener, you can use this organic soybean meal, alfalfa meal. You could take alfalfa hay, and put that in your soil. I use blood meal because it's quick nitrogen and it easily goes into the soil and the plant. If I want it to last longer in the soil, then I'm going to use alfalfa meal, things like that. You want these soil components to last throughout the growing.
So that's one big distinction too between conventional versus organic is that conventional fertilizers are meant to be quick acting to get quick growth, right? Versus organic is a more sustained kind of growth over time. For people that are wanting to garden or are already gardening, what are your top tips?
Well, okay, here goes back to my mistakes. You need to be thinking like 3 years ahead. Once you have a weed bank, man, it's almost like you're always going to have a weed bank. If I had known now what I should have known then,
Right.
I do know now, is that I would have not had a seed bank. What I would have done,
You would not have had a seed bank?
no, I would not have had a seed bank. So
What does that mean?
I would have killed off everything in a natural way long
Oh, so you
before.
mean when you first started planting, you had a whole bunch of weeds all over the place?
Any weed that goes to fruition in your field, you never ever want these weeds to be seeding. They become entrenched in your crop
Right.
and you can't get them, or they come up out of the canopy late in the season after your crop is already there and fruit is already there and you can't get to the weeds. But
Yeah, because you don't want to pull
in
up your
these,
roots.
oh,
So you're
I
saying a
should,
seed bank is when you've allowed a weed to go to produce its own seeds,
I'm
and
sure.
then they've scattered all over the place.
So it's all laying on the ground, and then you're planting a cover crop, you're moving soil around, and
Yep.
these seeds get put down into the soil at depths where they won't germinate, but that they can last for 30 years.
And then they'll get tilled up.
And every time you move soil around,
Right.
you do things like tarping, mulching, things that do not allow these things to come to fruition.
Okay, let's say somebody's starting a garden, right? And there's weeds on it, maybe it's a lawn, and they want to turn a part of it into a garden. What would you say is the best thing to do? To tarp it with some kind of cover to
Well, it
block
depends
out the
on how
sunlight,
big,
or what would you do?
obviously, it depends how big it's going to be. If it's
Let's
going
say
to
it's a
be like,
20 foot by 30 foot.
no, I wouldn't tarp it. I would cover it with so much organic matter that it would serve the same purpose as tarping, but that would allow the organisms underneath to be feeding
Oh,
on
okay.
all
So
this
what kind
stuff.
of organic matter would you start with?
Leaves, grass, hay, straw, manure, horse manure.
You would do that for how long before you would
I,
be able to plant?
I do it the whole year ahead.
Okay, so a year ahead, you'd cover your plot with all of these different
Yeah. Then the
manures
next
and hay and
then the next year you
straw.
pull that off to a certain degree and you've got this nice soil underneath
Yep.
that's soft and fluffy and you've got lots of microorganisms and a lot of fertility from that is worked down in. I should have said that before you put this down, you got to balance the pH. So you probably should have taken a soil sample.
I was
Okay.
just going to ask about the soil sample. Yes, you want to
So
see what you're working with first. Okay, so just to be safe, soil sample first, then you put all the manures and
yeah,
hay and straw and leaves and whatever you have on this plot that you're going to grow in, and that stays for a year. And then you've peeled
so
back some of that.
so the benefits of that is you started with something that was growing there, right?
Right. Because there was life in the soil.
Right, but it's not the crop you want. So by burying it up in all this, not only have you shut off the sunlight, but you've created the moisture in there where decay is easy. Now you've converted all the upper growth that was there to fertilizer. Not only that, but all of the roots that were there now become organic channels for the new roots to grow and
Oh,
penetrate the soil so they can go down in there and eat their way down these decaying roots
yep.
and create new pathways for water to go down, water to come up, and soil organisms and minerals. So you've gotten a benefit of a lot of different things by doing
Yep.
that. Create windrows of organic matter. Then you can pull it off and you can have your pathways covered so they
Yep.
won't grow up to weeds. Or you pull it apart, you get your transplants in or your plants in, and then you kind of pull it back in.
Oh, okay. So you've just got what you've planted up in the sunshine, but you still have that sort of protective layer that's keeping anything else from growing up alongside those desired plants.
I'll get my transplants up probably 18 inches high or so, high enough so that I can break off the lower branches. Then I'll come in with alfalfa
Oh,
and I'll mulch with alfalfa. And of course, all those alfalfa leaves
yep.
going down on top of the soil. So now you have the ability for your roots to be at soil surface.
Oh,
Otherwise, it's too dry at soil
okay.
surface for roots. So they're up at soil surface, and
Oh, and
that's
they're up there because the alfalfa is protecting them versus,
protecting it. So you're getting full use of the soil. You're
I
getting
see.
that transition even above the soil. So you're getting every square inch and you're breaking down that alfalfa. They have determined that there's some things in alfalfa and seaweed and fish fertilizer that they scientifically can't figure out that are beneficial for
But it
plants.
does an amazing job. And even mushrooms, right? There's a whole network that's created with the root
Mycelium.
structures of mushrooms that sends information back and forth between plants and all kinds of magical stuff. Any other tips for gardeners that you think are important to know?
I can't underestimate the learning by mistakes.
Yeah. So just try things and do some
Try
research.
try everything under the planet.
Right. Plant the things that you like to eat first.
If you plant 30 things, right? And 35 fail. No,
Wait, that doesn't work.
yeah,
Try that
25
again.
fail, but you have five things that just excelled and blew your mind.
Yeah.
You're going to forget about those 25 things,
Right. So do those five that did really well next
right? And
time.
then next year you'll have 50 things that you're really intelligent at. And other than spending a little extra time, that you've really locked in your mind
Right.
how to grow. And it's just
So
part of
just
it.
thinking
That's
about
true.
what you use for fertilizer. So you're using the alfalfa, but you're using dehydrated chicken manure. And what else?
I've even used microbes now to enhance activity in the roots and the plant.
And how do you apply those? What
Well, they're
form is
just
that?
microbes who drench the soil in a
So
liquid.
it's the powder, it's a
There's
liquid. What is
both.
it?
There's both. There's all
Both.
kinds.
So
Okay. I
either
just
one.
happen to have used a liquid and then there was a powder after that.
You spray the soil,
Just
you spray
done
the plants.
several modes. Put them in the soil and let them spread around in the soil by themselves. There are ones for plant protection that you would spray on.
Okay.
Foliar.
Once the plants are already up, you can spray them.
Yeah. There are
Yep.
some that you want to get the roots. So you
Yep.
would drench the roots in. This is another aspect of fungus control or
Ah,
disease control or promotion of those organisms in the soil that help promote fertility. So they've researched and found out that the best way to go here is to put natural things in that promote the best outcomes. These are living things,
biological. And I want to
biological.
make that distinction too, because people often think organic means no pesticides. But what it really means is no toxic synthetic pesticides, because you're able to use biological substances. What would be some common ones that you use for, you know, mitigating some of the pests that you're dealing with?
One that would be most common to everybody is Bacillus thuringiensis. It's been around for a long time. It's been an organic friend because it's a little bacteria that these worms that destroy your crop, they have a stomach upset and fall off the plant. Well, now go a step further and you have all these little bacterium that you can put in the close proximity of the roots or the plant leaf and they're absorbed by the plant. And then along come these other things that want to attack your plant but can't because this biological that you have on the plant that's living there in symbiosis
Ah,
that doesn't hurt the plant, but fungus that comes to sit on the plant. And this is
interesting.
where the industry is going is there are all these biologics out there that they're finding out are just far more beneficial that are
Right,
natural in nature
right.
that are going to be the mainstream.
That's awesome. Any funny stories that you can think of as far as your farming adventures?
So my maple business and fruit and vegetable business overlap in the spring. The strawberries, sometimes in April, cold weather will come and they'll need covering to promote quick growth. And I'll be up on the mountain washing pipelines, right? So I have these big, huge row covers on the strawberry
Oh, yeah.
fields, and they're held down with rocks. So I'm up there on the mountain, and all the time I'm up there, all the things I need to get back, I need to get the row cover up, I need to plant things, I need to do things.
Yeah, the never-ending to-do list.
So finish up on the mountain, and I come down to the farm. Something's different. What's different? Something doesn't look right. And I look at the strawberry field. The whole row cover is missing. It's gone. There's nothing but rocks left. Somebody stole my row cover in broad daylight, right? Why would somebody do that? Boy, they were
Right.
pretty brave. Well, they're expensive, right? And I can't believe somebody's done this to me. And I'm in a tither. I can't believe it. I just don't understand what's going on. All of a sudden, this created a huge problem too, because now I have no protection
Right.
for the strawberries. So I'm in a stew. Somebody comes by a few days later and they're all like, wow, that was quite a show at your place the other day. What do you mean? So they said, well, we watched this giant magic carpet floating above your farm for 20 minutes and then it drifted over the mountain. Oh my
Unbelievable. And we
God.
never found it.
Apparently, we have these little whirly winds, like little mini tornadoes. It had caught one of the edges of the row cover and
Amazing.
it started working it up piece by piece and it pulled off the rocks and it got it up way up above the farm in the air and it floated up there.
I
This is,
remember that was a beautiful blue sky sunny day.
yeah, it
It was
was.
so weird.
And
And that, how big was that row cover?
That was, I think, 400 by 35 feet.
That is just remarkable. What do you want people to know about organic farming that they might not know?
We need more people to get passionate about it.
Yep.
Farmers are declining in most parts of the country. I think there's one farmer for 200 people now. Most farmers are at 60 plus. I'm one of those. There are not the younger generation for a lot of these farms to come in and
Right.
carry on the traditions, like farming endeavors, as far as my family will end with me more than likely.
Yeah.
The maple part and the
And the
fruit and
vegetable
veggie part.
fruits. Yeah.
So it, one thing we do have in Vermont is kind of a resurgence of a lot of young farmers in the veggie trade,
Yep.
but there's the whole resilience factor. The
So you
whole
really have to have the passion like you do. You have to have that passion to want to grow food or whatever crop you're growing and have that be satisfying beyond just the transactional selling it to people piece of it. Otherwise, it's probably not worth doing all that work.
something's got to make you get up off that mat over and over again.
Exactly.
Something's got to feed
Feed your
that.
soul.
Yeah, it does. If
Yeah.
it's not there, boy, it, not that I don't swear now and then on the farm.
Oh, for
I have
sure.
my I have my days, but
Yeah.
apparently there's enough of the feeling of euphoria when we've had a successful season. People are saying, "Wow, you have the best tomatoes. Wow, your sweet corn is so much better. You
Yeah.
have the greatest watermelon." So
That's what keeps you going and feeds you.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or somebody brings in a magazine or a tourist comes in, wow, we saw you in a magazine.
Yeah.
We
Or
saw
on
you
TV.
on TV.
Yeah.
Wow, you're such a picturesque place. Or they turn around. Well, we just had to turn around and they come in the farm and they buy your
Yep.
stuff and then
Yep. We
every
saw you from the road and we had to come in. I've heard that so many times. Love that.
that isn't manufactured. That's something that comes from your hands and your vision of what other people might like.
Yeah. So, final parting words. Is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have asked you?
There's a thousand different things. This, I always said that farming has more science, more mathematics, more research, more history than almost any subject you can think of.
So, it's very comprehensive as far as all the different topics that you're covering. Actually, I want to end on the note of what does it mean to you to work with nature, to work with the land? How does that part of this experience of farming play into this experience?
Forever in our history, people have gone on walkabouts and gone into nature for clarity, to figure out their place. Walking out in nature, they have they have researched it is one of the most medicinal things you can do for your mind and body. The folks go on vision quests. They go out into nature. My own son went on a month-long journey on the Long Trail.
Yeah.
Such a turnaround for his existence and his feelings and his maturity. So working with nature, nature's the boss. Nature doesn't learn anything from you. Last time nature learned anything from you other than to run from you, right?
Right.
I guess that's maybe part of my existence is a connection with that
Yeah.
in
I
the
love that.
mountains. The
Me
the,
too.
the maple is on a mountain. It's involved with brooks and surrounding nature. Nature. Everywhere I look, there's a bird, woodpecker singing up there, or the brook running, clinkle, 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 or the ice cave and the trickle of the water making a different
Yeah.
sound in the wintertime. I was in the maple orchard last week. Now here it is early December. Had 7 groups of geese go over while I was
Oh,
working up
that's so
there.
wild.
And then in the spring, when I'm working, I have them all coming back over and I hear their
Yeah.
song. They sing, and it's a rite of passage, and it tells me where I am in all this.
Mm,
The years passed,
that's
but you
beautiful.
never get tired of it. You never get tired of planting that seed and watching every one of its stages.
That's the interesting thing. You grow all this amazing food on our farm, and yet I love having my own gardens around the house. And I love that experience of planting this little tiny seed that turns into these magical plants that then deliver us with food and flowers and medicinal herbs and whatever it is that we're planting. So I obviously we have this in common among many other things, but yes, this love of nature, this love of the way nature produces for us and just the magic that goes along with all of that. So, thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for joining me for the Green Living Now podcast. I hope you found the conversation inspiring and useful. And if you did, I would love it if you subscribed to my channel, left a review, and shared it with somebody that you think might be interested in green living. It helps us reach more people who want to live healthy and sustainable lives. I have a 7-day Green Living Kickstart Challenge. That is a free program that helps you take small, impactful steps to living a non toxic, eco friendly, and holistic life. And there'll be daily actions, pro tips, and there's an online community that you can join that will be there to support you along with me. You can go to my website, greenlivingnow.com, and it's all at no cost. Until next time, remember, together our small steps create a ripple effect for the planet. Take care, and I'll see you in the next episode.